While I'm a bit late, I honestly wasn't expecting Palco to give us the Week 17 spreadsheet until like July. But really, it was all intentional because I was
waiting for the perfect time to get back at the Dolphins, the time when it would hurt them the most. Super Bowl time.
We start off the final week like every other week, discussing who among us has made the
biggest mess of it.
Knowing what the standings are, it would be obvious to choose Spurgeon TSSS win this week. Now, I can't place all the blame on his picks, as he had a 65 and 73 point lead over the two people chasing him going into the final week, both needing well above average weeks to pass Spurgeon. Average week is around 30 points, but the Rams and Bills don't follow BQBL averages. What ended up happening was mostly out of Spurgeon's control, but starting Oakland after Carr got injured a week earlier sure would have been a wise decision. I don't even need hindsight to tell you that. Instead, he goes with Indianapolis at home against the Jaguars. Did the commissioner have something to do with that decision? I don't live near a coast, but something smells fishy. Let's review the final standings real quick before I get into the end of season awards. In first place, our champion for the year,
with an asterisk,
is Johnny effing Moxon. Helped along the way with 24 7-point crutches, Moxon's year was like starting a Mario Kart race on lap 2 already with items turned off.
We gave him the friggin' game.
His 80 non-game points was nearly 1/7 of his final score. Yeah, the points were in the league rules this year, so they count the same, but hopefully the Royd era comes to a close next year. We will see how well Moxon navigates the links without a handicap. I bet he ends up in the sand more times than not. Without the points, he probably would have finished second or third, so he still did a good job drafting and picking. Congratulations to our new champion. Like an asshole, if you repeat 2 more times, you get to make a rule. In second place is Kellen Moore, who really put the heat on Moxon in the final week's afternoon game. I'm proud of my second place finish after being in 7th and 6th place for a while, and it didn't help that I started week 3 with negative total points while some people are already above 100. I look forward to next year, but how long until my apathy towards the NFL catches up with me and I don't know how to draft? In third place is Chad Hutchinson, the man who spent almost every week this season in the top half of the standings. Chad never had a negative week all season, had the highest week of the season, but his lack of 50-plus point weeks meant he was never going to make a big jump in the standings or distance himself from others. His draft picks were interesting, but we'll get on to that later. Wade Wilson's scores were just like Chad Hutchinson's draft, all over the place. Held back by his streak of picking one bad team, he also didn't pick his best team many weeks, but it didn't matter for the final week as his teams just didn't put up enough points. What a ride! Finishing 5th was Cleo Lemon. I underestimated his draft and picks at times throughout the season. How was he going to find enough games not to start Cleveland or Buffalo? In hindsight, 2 out of the 3 weeks he benched Cleveland were not the best times, but his final decision, not that it was a hard one, of starting Buffalo is what propelled him out of relegation, which is where he would have landed without their 86 points. In 6th place, we find Mr. 6th place himself, Tyler Palco. Somehow he did it without 7 months of research this year. It wasn't easy, and he needed a lot of suspicious help along the way. Really, Indy over Oakland, Spurgeon? But after 17 weeks, he finally figured out the Rams.
I should have been off coaching the Rams if you didn't drug test us.
Honestly, if I owned the top BQBL scoring team all season and got relegated, I'd be pretty embarrassed. He even benched them 2 more times than he needed to. Palco should change his BQBL sponsor to Sean Mannion, since he owes them big time for keeping him in the Curse League. Palco gives the one-finger wave to Spurgeon TSSS win in 7th place. It must suck to drop from 2nd place 2 weeks ago to relegation, but that's what scoring 1 point in week 16 and then 2 points in week 17 will do to you. But also, we wouldn't be talking about him being relegated if Buffalo and Los Angeles both didn't have amazing weeks. Tim Tebow time, best luck next year. In 2015, it was you and me racing for promotion, and I have no doubt you'll be in contention again in 2017. Now for some interesting stats on the season. First, I'm going to go over what I'm calling picking power, comparing where you should have ended up based on your drafted team potential scores, and where you eventually ended up based on your awful picking. Johnny effing Moxon gets a +0 because based on his drafted teams, he ended up right where he should have been in 1st place. Kellen Moore actually finished 2 spots above where he should have ended up based on his drafted teams, and Chad Hutchinson also picked well, finishing 3 spots above where he should have been based on his teams. Wade Wilson did a little bit worse, but not too far off where he should have been. Cleo was right where he should have been, and the real story here is Tyler Palco, who was a terrible picker, picking Green Bay and the Rams when he shouldn't, and Miami to finish the season. Really not good. Really poor form there by Palco.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
Spurgeon, despite sliding to relegation at the last week of the season, actually finished right where I guess he should have been, according to the draft. And Tim Tebow, of course, finished right where he should have been. Now let's list the biggest standings change throughout the season. Interesting that a couple of us only needed to finish in a few spots to catch them all. Johnny effing Moxon ranged his standings from 6th to 1st. Kellen Moore actually finished in almost every single spot this season except for 5th. Chad Hutchinson never ranked below 5th place. Wade Wilson and Cleo ranged themselves from 7th to 2nd. Cleo actually finishing in every single one of those spots except for 1st and 8th. Tyler Palco was everywhere except for 8th and 3rd. Spurgeon TSS's Win only needed to finish in first and third to get them all, and Tim Tebow Time missed out on the whole top half of the standings. Some other interesting facts: the number of people who called first place home this season was 4. Moxon, Hutchinson, Moore, and Palco, and 3 of those were dethroned at one point and then retook first place later on in the season. The only person who never reclaimed the top spot after leaving it was Kellen Moore. The number of people who called the relegation zone their home this season was 6. Only Moxon and Hutchinson never sweated it out there. The number of weeks Tim Tebow Time was not in the relegation zone was 1, and the number of people with no negative weeks was 1, being Chad Hutchinson. Now it's time for some season streaks. The best week all season was Chad Hutchinson's week 2 score of 99, followed closely by Cleo Lemon in week 17 of 98, and Tyler Palco's 95 in the same week. The worst weeks all season were Wade Wilson's negative 34 in week 6, Tim Tebow Time had a negative 19, and both Kellen Moore and Tyler Palco scored negative 18 at some point this season. 2-week streak honors go to Johnny Effie Moxon's 142, Tyler Palco's 139, and Kellen Moore had a 134. The worst 2-week slide was Wade Wilson with a negative 23, Tim Tebow Time recorded a negative 7 over a 2-week span, and then Spurgeon TSS's Win also had a negative 4. Talking about 3-week spans here, Kellen Moore recorded a 187, Johnny Effie Moxon a 166, and then Wade Wilson had a nice stretch there with a 149. Worst 3-week accolades go to Tim Tebow Time with a score of 2 over 3 weeks. Wade Wilson had a 7 over 3 weeks, and Tyler Palco managed to score an 8 over 3 weeks. The most 50-plus point weeks honor goes to Johnny Effie Moxon with 6. Kellen Moore had 5, and Tyler Palco and Mr. Relegation himself, Spurgeon TSS's Win, had 4. Interesting that third place Chad Hutchinson only had 1 week above 50 points, and that was his 99. The most weeks recorded under 10 points, we have everyone else who was in the bottom half of the standings basically. Tim Tebow Time had 6, Spurgeon had 5, Cleo Lemon and Palco both had 4. Now starts a segment called Top 5 Missed Opportunities.
This will win the game for Miami. There's the snap. Marino holds the kick. And it's wide. Oh, no, it's no good. Ray Finkel blew a 26-yard field goal.
Number 1, in week 12, Kellen Moore is in second place behind Chad Hutchinson. In the midst of starting
San Francisco
4 weeks in a row and going nowhere, he decides to bench them right as they put up a 117. Kellen Moore never sees second place again until the final week of the season, and this surely would have earned him the championship had he started them that week. Number 2, the writing was on the wall for months as Tim Tebow Time further distanced themselves from any hope of getting out of 8th place, 131 points back from 7th place on week 14. That week, he benches Seattle during their 84-point game, and then finishes the season benching Baltimore, giving up 55 points. Switching just those 2 picks plus 1 more in week 16 would have got him to 491, which would have been enough to finish 6th place if you can imagine that. Number 3, missed opportunities were the name of the game for Tyler Palco, who was sitting in first place in week 11. Then in week 12, he goes on to pick his 2 worst teams. In week 14, he not only picks his 2 worst teams again, misses out on 77 bench points. Then he finishes the season starting Miami 4 times, earning him negative 8 points over that span, while the Rams earned 97 points on the bench, a true competitor to Jamarcus Russell's bench earlier in the year. Number 4, I can't do a segment about missed opportunities without talking about Wade Wilson. His streak of picking a team that scored 0 or worse was unheard of before this season. Changing his worst pick to just his second worst pick during those 9 weeks would have gained him 46 more points, and his best weeks over that span would have put his final score at almost 700. Number 5, week 3, Johnny Effie Moxon recently drops to 6th place, and he benches the Jets during their 123-point performance. He remains in 6th place afterwards, but in week 4 bounces to 2nd and never looks back. This one doesn't sting much since he goes on to win the league anyways. Honorable mention to Spurgeon TSS's Win, who definitely had some opportunities to pick himself out of relegation with some changes here and there, but it's not like he had a lot of potential he missed out on with his drafted teams. Now let's talk about some draft highlights and blunders. Every single team had a negative week at some point in the season, but Philadelphia had the kindest negative week at negative 4. Oakland and New Orleans had the worst negative weeks at negative 29 each, which Wade Wilson remembers well. The 2 best weeks were by the Jets, 123, and the 49ers, 117, but neither of their owners started them those weeks. Tyler Palco then gets the highest team pick award for the Rams, week 17, with a score of 88. The best drafters, based on when they were drafted and where they finished in the season based on total points. Wade Wilson was actually the best drafter. His teams finished negative 13 spots above where they were drafted. Kellen Moore's teams finished 4 points better than where they were drafted, and Chad Hutchinson also had a strong draft. Cleo Lemon's draft and teams finished right about where they should have. Johnny Effie Moxon wasn't too far off the pace, neither was Tim Tebow Time. But Spurgeon TSS's Wins and Tyler Palco's teams teams did worse than they were drafted to, I guess. However, the Jets and LA kind of skew these results, so even though Palco and Johnny Effie Moxon drafted poorly, their top teams more than made up for the lost points. For instance, the Jets were a steal and the Rams were the right number 1 overall choice. Speaking of steals, the top 3 steals of the draft: Carolina by Chad Hutchinson, drafted 31st but finished 5th in points. The Jets by Johnny Effie Moxon, drafted 10th but finished 2nd in points. And Arizona, also by Johnny Effie Moxon, drafted 26th and finished 12th. So you might think Johnny Effie Moxon drafted well. Well, here's the top 3 worst draft picks. Minnesota by Chad Hutchinson, drafted 2nd overall, finishing 19th. Dallas by the aforementioned Johnny Effie Moxon, drafted in the first round but finished at 23rd. Denver by Tim Tebow time, drafted 4th, also in the first round, but finished 15th. Now let's talk about the trade that occurred this season. Tyler Palco claims the Week 7 trade of Atlanta and New England did nothing, but Johnny Effie Moxon was the only person who had a team or teams that ended the season with negative potential points. His hybrid 3rd round pick of early Atlanta and late New England. His 4 picks of Atlanta New England got him 19 points during the season, and my 6 picks of New England/Atlanta earned me 43. So suck it, Ortiz. However, my final required pick of Atlanta happened to be on the same week that I could have started the 49ers and got their 117 points. So perhaps Johnny Effie Moxon got the last laugh. Also interesting that we traded the 2 teams that ended up going to the Super Bowl. And now the section everyone's been waiting for: high school awards. The award for most likely to win the championship next year. My vote goes to Chad Hutchinson. His only real blunder on the whole season was drafting Minnesota in the first round. Take almost any other team there and he would have walked away with it this year. The 2016 award for most likely to get relegated next year. My vote goes to Wade Wilson, mainly because of his up and down season. I mean, could he surprise me and finish first place? Sure. But I think with Brian Moorman and Cade McNown next year, the league is going to get a lot tougher. Now for a very important award. After much deliberation between the commissioner and myself, the award for best hair in 2016 goes to Cade McNown. Hell, let's give him best dressed too. The award for most likely to get promoted from the Turbush League next year. I have no reason to think that Spurgeon TSSS Wynn won't be back in the Kirsch League in 2018, unless he starts Andrew Luck over a second-string quarterback, but I think he's learned his lesson. The award for least likely to get promoted next year in the Caleb Turbush League. Sorry, Jeff George, but you're not proving to me or anyone else that you have what it takes to get promoted next year. And last, but certainly not least, the Best Car Award goes to Brian Moorman, who I think is the only BQBLer with a car that can both drive on land and can be flipped upside down to float on a river.
And finally, here's the Caleb Turbush League final standings. Congratulations to Brian Moorman and Cade McNown, both Kirsch League veterans who will surely spice things up next year.